The hollow path. Caden stirred slowly in the restraining cradle, his thoughts swimming through the chemical haze. He didn't remember the surgery, not precisely. Only fragments. The sharp scent of necroform plastics, the cold hiss of vaporized pain inhibitors, a voice speaking low Gothic and Grimness accent in lilting, mocking tones of the dark Mechanicus. His own scream, somewhere beneath it all. A lumen globe flickered above him, casting shadows across the black-veined med slab. Thin veins of spider steel curved across the ceiling. Drukhari reinforcement struts, elegant and cruel. To his left, Halatrax sat shirtless on a rust-padded cot, the left side of his chest and arm exposed, muscle tissue red and raw from chemical reweaving. A Drukhari Medicae, her skin tight as lacquered leather, her eyes featureless black, worked on him with a chirurgical wand, whispering not to him, but to the wound, as if coaxing it to behave. "You're awake," Halatrax said, not looking over. His voice was hoarse. "That's good. Thought they might have sliced your omophagia for fun." Caden flexed a hand, one of the few body parts they hadn't tampered with. His enhanced organs pulsed faintly, still sluggish from suppressants. "They took samples," he said quietly. "All of them. I felt them go." Halatrax nodded. "Me too. I think they kept mine in different jars." He gave a dry, pained chuckle. The Drukhari Medicae paused long enough to inject something into Halatrax's radial nerve cluster. He winced as green light traced up his veins like creeping ivy. "Radiation scarring," she said absently, her voice like glass on tile. "Flaws of a flawed design. You were cooked. Regrowth will take 3 more cycles." She moved on without waiting for thanks. Across the chamber, Baelgor leaned against a column of preserved nerve stimulants, his helmet removed, eyes dark beneath the flicker of old lumen tubes. He held a data slate in one gauntlet, scrawled with shiproute calculations and long-range Vox intercepts. "The Perfuga is ready," he said. "Supplies are loaded. Crew are waiting. Valeth has withdrawn his observers, for now." Caden said nothing. Baelgor stepped closer, his voice dropping. "But I found something else. A Vox trace, barely encrypted, from a scout frigate of the Navis Astra Wigathane. They've charted the Hollow Crown." Halatrax stiffened. "They know?" Baelgor nodded grimly. "They know the Hollow Crown still exists. Maybe they haven't confirmed it's active, but they might be planning to reinitialize it for themselves, for their new shiny grand fleet." Caden sat up straighter, his joints creaking like old servo joints under strain. He looked toward the sealed blast door, flanked by 2 Drukhari guards in bone-laced armor. "They'll come for it," he murmured. "And we have nowhere else to operate from with the facilities we need." Halatrax grunted. "Then we do what we always do. Run, hide, repeat." Caden turned sharply to him. No more running." His voice was firm now. "We've been running for 5,000 years." Baelgor smirked bitterly. "And you plan to defend the station? With what? An ore barge and a half-dead Karabath?" Caden nodded, slow but deliberate. "We leave Elfscathia. The Perfuga returns to the Hollow Crown. We prepare it for flight and tow it to a new location." He looked down at the fresh scar tissue on his chest, still sealed with synthetic bioglaze. "They'll come looking, but when they find nothing, only empty orbit, they'll assume it broke atmosphere and plunged into the gas giant. It's plausible. They won't know we took it." Baelgor stared at him. "We don't have the ships to tow it. Not at any speed. And we don't have jump engines that could handle translation even if Ingasor managed a navigation miracle." Satan turned toward Valkaron. "Your kind usually has a solution for this sort of thing. Portents, rituals, warp-born cheats. Any ideas?" Valkaron rubbed a hand down his face, annoyed. "We read the warp. We influence tides and shift variables. We're not magicians, Satan. The powers of the warp are wondrous. Yes, but moving a space station." Caden gave him a deadpan look. "That's why we employ you. Go and do it." Valkaron exhaled slowly, straightening a parchment fragment affixed to his pauldron. "Very well, I will consult scripture and myth and see what I can conjure." He walked off, muttering to himself in Old Gothic. Baelgor raised an eyebrow. "So even if that works, where do we move it to?" Caden opened his mouth to reply, then paused. A pressure curled at the back of his mind. Not pain, but presence. A tapping sensation behind his thoughts, like a psyker knocking gently on the walls of his skull. He turned, wincing as pain lanced through his shoulder. Standing silently near the hatchway was a tall, robed figure, her eyes like void glass, her staff crowned in barbed crescents. Witch sorceress Elith. Her voice echoed, not aloud, but inside his mind. Follow. She turned and vanished through the hatch without a sound. Caden stood slowly, bones still sore and body sluggish under the lingering effects of surgery. The artificial gravity felt wrong, but maybe it was just him. He hoped it was just him. He glanced back at the others. Hālgengas grunted, slipping awkwardly off his cot. If we die, I blame the robe. Baelgor grabbed a bottle of half-synth wine, tucked it into his belt, and followed without a word. The passages they followed had once been gun carriage tracks. Wide grooves used to haul macro shells to the spinal batteries of a great warship, back when the Space Hulk was still a functioning battleship. The Drukhari had begun overlaying the walls with curved bone and chitin, but the work was incomplete. Jagged steel ribs protruded between delicate inlays like an autopsy partway through. They passed a winch room, where the skeletal remains of massive lift shafts yawned into darkness. Cartridges the size of tanks had once moved along them. Beyond a rusting access tunnel, they emerged into a chamber that looked as though it had been stolen from a Drukhari vessel entirely. The room was tall and unnaturally elegant, sculpted of living bone, reinforced with glassy cartilage. Narrow windows overlooked the city below, Elfscathia, flickering with artificial twilight and biolumens. Mist drifted past outside the windows, condensation from the Hulk's broken climate systems. The smell of spices and cooking wafted up from the market. It smelt like autumn, a scent so strange it made Caden pause. Witch sorceress Eilith stood by the windows, motionless as a statue. Sorny Naevna stood beside her, similarly silent, looking down upon the cityscape. Her armor sat on a nearby rack, gleaming silver and gray, freshly polished, ready for pigment. Sorny herself wore a Drukhari garment, something between ritual robe and gladiatorial wrap, clearly improvised. It did not cover her back, and Caden saw the marks of recent surgery along her spine. Her pale skin, nearly translucent, was marked with intricate tribal tattoos, sigils that shimmered faintly under the chamber's cold light. She looked more Xenos than human now, closer to a Drukhari than to anything born of Terra. Eilith turned without expression. "Ah!" she said softly, "you are here." Sorny turned from the window, gave Caden a formal bow, and leaned on the balustrade with ease. She showed no fear of the dizzying drop beneath her, only calm. Caden, Baelgor, and Hālgengas found spots to stand along the chamber's edge. Baelgor casually placed his half-finished bottle on a bone-carved table, then reached for a different one from a display rack, its casing dark, its wax seal ancient. Eilith's eyes narrowed. "That wine," she said with thin disdain, "is a Drukhari vintage, over 800 years old." Baelgor uncorked it with a twist, sniffed it, and poured a quarter of the bottle into his mouth. He nodded. "Yes, it's good." Eilith gave him the kind of smile one reserves for a dog that's just left a mess on the floor. She let it pass. Her attention shifted. "How much do you know," she asked evenly, "of the history of the Maelstrom Reach?" Caden folded his arms. He wasn't sure where she was going with this, but he indulged her. Pre-heresy, the Crusade cleared out a Xenos species. Big insectoids. I never saw them, but I knew men who did. Nasty things. They interfered with nav data and warp lanes. Hard to fight, but they were cleared eventually. He stepped toward the window, looking down at the glow of the market below. During the heresy, the 10th Legion fought the 15th here. We worked alongside the Iron Legion out of Incaloris. 6 months, we burned the region clean. He glanced back, the corners of his mouth tight. After that, I never heard another whisper about the Reach. Then I joined the other side. Hālgengas leaned back against a wall of ribbed bone. I fought on Grimness. The planet was split. Dark Mechanicus and Loyalists. Manifold Dawn backed us with void support. He glanced at Caden. Then I joined him. We both changed sides. Baelgor swirled the bottle, then set it back on the table with a heavy clink. "Don't look at me," he said. "I served with the 3rd. We never operated out here. My warband wandered this way 1,000 years ago. That's when I arrived." He tilted his head at Eilith. "Begging your pardon, of course." Eilith raised an eyebrow, but her smile was genuine this time. "I am only 720, she said with a graceful incline of her head. "But thank you, and for the history I speak of." She paused, her voice dropping lower, more reverent. I was thinking of a time further back. This is part folklore, part harlequin song, and part scripture, Eilith said, her voice echoing softly in the high-boned chamber. What little survived the fall? She turned to face them fully. Many years ago, long before the rise of your people, the Drukhari and the Eldari were one race. Our imperium spanned the stars. That much you already know. The fall shattered that empire and made way for your kind to inherit the galaxy, though you haven't done the best job of it. She smiled faintly. But that's beside the point. Kedon didn't argue. He'd rebelled for that very reason. He simply held out his hand in a gesture of curiosity, genuinely interested now. Back in the days of the Eldari Imperium, Eilith continued, your people began to explore the galaxy. You didn't have warp travel then. You used sleeper ships, slow, creeping vessels that crossed the stars over centuries, bringing colonists to distant worlds. Eventually, you did develop warp flight. That marked your so-called golden age. She gave a slight, mocking bow. At that time, my people withdrew from the affairs of the galaxy. We handed over the chalice, so to speak. Kadeen nodded, arms crossed. I came in at the tail end of the aftermath, but I'm guessing there's a reason you're telling me this now. Oh, yes. Eilith turned back toward the window. You see, in those early days, there was an expedition, one of your great colony fleets. They came to this region, what you now call the Maelstrom Reach. Her tone darkened slightly. The Maelstrom itself didn't exist then. That came later. But these colonists, they claimed this entire region. Their history has been erased, forgotten, but there are remnants if you know where to look. Kadon raised an eyebrow. And what does this have to do with current affairs? Eilith smiled. Everything. In fact, it's the reason all of us are here. Kadon glanced at the others. Halatrax, Baelgor, Sorny. None of them spoke. Go on, he said. Eilith nodded. This early expedition approached the Eldari for aid. The details are lost. Perhaps famine, mutation, or spiritual decay, but a renegade faction of our kind agreed to help them. With their knowledge and your own proto-generites, these humans were altered. Not individually, generationally. She stepped forward, staff tapping against the bone-plated floor. They were adapted for this region's hostile tides. 2 key traits emerged in one colony, NihtWyrtha, deathless skin and seer sight. They were designed to be more durable and more psychic, an entire population of latent psychers, in effect post-humans, not unlike what your emperor would attempt, much later. The chamber fell silent. Even Baelgor stopped swirling his wine. Eilith's eyes gleamed. Their hubris, of course, led to the collapse of their colonies. Their great vision failed, and now all that remains is modern NihtWyrtha. Kedon exhaled slowly. That explains a few things. He tilted his head. But I get the feeling you're not done. There were 2 colonies, Eilith began, her voice echoing against the chamber walls. 2 expeditions. 2 differing factions that set out from Terra. One was NihtWyrtha, the Night Shaper. The other was called Star's End, named, I believe, after its dying sun. She turned toward the balustrade, watching the mist drift beyond the windows. NihtWyrtha was to be a world of psychers, sensitive, prophetic, evolved. Star's End, by contrast, was to become a world of warriors, one to see the storm coming, the other to meet it in battle. Together, they were meant to conquer the galaxy or protect it. The texts are conflicted. Either way, their power was not meant for someone. Kadon's expression was grim, his voice flat. And I take it this other colony, Star's End, failed. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. Eilith nodded. Yes, the calamity that befell them came with the rise of the Neverborn. The seers of NihtWyrtha were too early in their development. They were wiped out. The warriors of Star's End, not yet strong enough to assist, were destroyed as well. All of this happened over 20,000 years ago. Baelgor grunted, reaching for another bottle. This one bore a label marked 900 years aged. He uncorked it without ceremony. Makes sense, he said. Even during the Crusade, the understanding of the warp was hazy. The imperial truth called the Neverborn a myth. We thought they were just entities. It denied the existence of gods. It's not surprising an early colony failed to stop them. Kadon glanced sharply toward Eilith. So what does that have to do with us? Without a word, Eilith took the bottle from Baelgor's hand and passed him another. This one bore a seal marked with the date of his ascension to Astartes. He blinked, looked at the label, and nodded to her, cradling it with reverence. Ilith's voice was quieter now, but colder. The new Space Marine chapter being created by the Iron Hands and their Archmagos is drawn from NihtWyrtha stock. These people carry what we call kind Saluth, tainted blood. Their latent seer ability would make them dangerous even among librarians. She paused. In terms you can understand, they are not baseline humans. They are part post-human, and part in and out of the warp. To us, Cain Saluth is a terrible memory, passed down for generations, a warning from time forgotten. Kadon didn't fully understand, but he grasped the edges. He turned toward the others. So hybrids, he said slowly. Not quite normal. I can see how they could be more dangerous, but I fail to see the fear you put into it. Ilith inclined her head. I can't tell you what makes them dangerous, I don't know, but I can tell you that last time this happened, it took considerable forces to stop it, and at that time our empire was far more powerful than yours is now. Elith crossed the chamber with slow reverence. Her clawed fingers moved across the edge of a wraithbone shelf, then lifted a stone tablet no larger than a man's chest. She carried it not as one displays art, but as a priest might bear a relic. The object was old, truly old, not crude like human stonework, but layered and strangely smooth, as if carved with light instead of tools. It shimmered faintly, bone-white under the room's dim glow. She laid it gently on the table between them. Caden stepped forward. Etched in low relief was a stylized hilltop. On it, 3 figures in ancient Eldari battle armor stood firing down into a writhing mass. Their posture was proud, desperate, unbowed. One wielded a long spear, another a shuriken launcher etched with star motifs. The third raised an open hand crackling with stylized psychic flame. But it was the enemy that arrested him. The horde that swarmed up the hill was grotesque, deformed, twisted. Their bodies were skeletal, but layered with unnatural bulk, as if stretched beyond the limits of human or Eldari flesh. Some had too many limbs, others none at all. Their faces were blank, featureless masks, but not void-like, mimicry, faint imitations of real beings. One figure was impaled through the torso, yet still climbed. Another gnawed at its own hand. In the back, tall shapes loomed with horns or spines or blades for arms, no two alike, but all clearly drawn from something the sculptor had seen. The detail was too exact to be myth. Kedon stared at it for a long moment, the lines of the carving burning into his mind. The artist saw this, he said at last. His voice was low. This wasn't imagined. He stood there, or someone close to him did. Ilith nodded, her tone quieter now. This piece predates the fall. I acquired it through a Harlequin vault, passed down by a silent masked seer. They say the sculptor burned out his soul, finishing the final figure. Kadon ran a finger across the edge of the hill, where the first of the clawed hands reached up. I can see now, he said slowly, why you're so interested in aiding us. Kadon rubbed his bandaged torso, his voice edged with urgency. Then we strike now. We don't wait. If they finish this project, we won't be able to stop them. Elith gave him a wry smile. Spoken like a true warrior. No wonder you lost your war. She turned away from the balustrade, pacing slowly across the chamber. No, Elfscathia doesn't have the numbers or strength to take on the novice Astra Wigathine directly. Their Archmagos has planned this too well. She stopped, eyes glittering. But we do have an alternative. Kadon leaned forward. Which is? Ilith's eyes lingered on the stone for a heartbeat longer. Then she looked up. The second colony, she said quietly. She raised a slender hand and pointed, not toward the carving but across the chamber, to Sorny Naevna. Sorny turned, her green eyes meeting Ilith's. Then, slowly, she glanced down and touched the bandages across her side. Fresh scars from surgery not entirely understood, not entirely human. She was found, Ilith continued, by your word-bearer, on a frozen world at the edge of space. A dying star overhead, a dead sky. They had gone there to hunt beasts to trade with us, for sport, for spice, for leverage. They expected prey. She looked directly at Kadon now, but instead they found a slip of a girl who killed one of their own, an Astartes, felled with a stone spear. She paused, letting the silence build like pressure in a chamber. They catalogued the world as KX Red 218, but the locals, those few who remain, call it Carvansari. Elith's voice was soft now, reverent. In the Uralkan tongue, Carvansari means star's end. The words landed like a hammer. Baelgor slowly lowered his bottle. Halatrax's eyes narrowed. Kadon stared hard at Sorny, not moving. No one spoke. Sorny shifted under the weight of their gaze. Her hand remained on the bandages. For a moment, under the flickering lumen light, she didn't look like a human at all. She looked like a thing from legend, a remnant from a war they never knew had started, much less ended. Eilith stepped away from the stone tablet and retrieved a slender data slate from beneath her robe. It was curved, crafted from some form of psychoreactive alloy that shimmered faintly in her hands. With a touch, it activated, projecting a spectral hololithic display above the table. Anatomical scans scrolled in ghostly light. Sorny's skeletal frame, her organs, blood work, and gene markers all annotated in a mixture of Eldari and high Gothic sigils. Following your surgery, Eilith said evenly, we took the liberty of performing a full Medicaid cross-reference. These are the results. She pointed to the display where organ names flickered. Susan membrane, oolitic kidney, neural interface spine, proto-black carapace, secondary heart, Lyman's ear, metabolic reinforcement clusters, cortical tactical lobe, Becher's gland. She has all of these, Eilith said, not as implants, not as surgical augmentations. Her gaze turned to Caden. She was born with them. Kadon's brow furrowed. She's naturally Astartes? He glanced at Sorny, who stood unmoving. Or part Astartes, a born post-human? Eilith nodded slightly. Part of the way there, an evolutionary template, if you like, a seed. She is what your people once hoped to become, without the need for surgery or indoctrination. She closed the slate, letting the hololith dissolve. It's remarkable, she added, how advanced your commonwealth was. Had it survived, it would have rivaled the old Eldari in time. Kadon looked down at the bone tablet again, the hilltop battle, the seer and the tide of monsters. His voice was low. I think, from this and from your story, we know why humanity gave up the project. He glanced at Sorny, then back to Eilith. It was too dangerous. Whatever they were building, it got out of control. Eilith's face was one of sadness. Yes, and now it is happening again. Kadon's eyes narrowed. But how does this help us? What do we do with this? Eilith stepped closer, the folds of her robes whispering against the bone-plated floor. Because now you understand the stakes, she said. She gestured to Sorny and then to Kadon himself. Voratrix and Wolfgar, they have Wirthan gene stock. Their psyker potential, their resilience, their visions, it is no accident. Their people descend from NihtWyrtha's seers. She paused. You, Kadon, and Sorny Naevna, you are born of a different bloodline, Thulathi. She pronounced it with weight, with history. The warrior line, Star's End. Kadon weighed Eilith's words, then turned his gaze to Sorny, her pale skin marked with tribal tattoos, still faintly luminescent in the chamber's glow. How many of you are there? He asked. On Carvansari? Sorny stepped forward, eyes drifting down to the carved stone artifact. She reached out, tracing a finger over the edge of the stylized revenants. We have stories, she said softly, of the hungry ones. They made the snow fall in summer. Our founders fell to them. She looked up, her expression unreadable as she met Kadon's eyes. There were 9 tribes of the Uralkin. Each lived on their own globe. Mine was the Thulathi. My clan had 30 members. My tribe, more than 30 clans. She shrugged faintly. I don't know how many survived on Carvansari. Kadon nodded slowly. And where is it, exactly? Sorny stepped closer, her voice steady. It's in the Incaloris region. Outer Rim. A frozen system without a name, just a designation. At that moment, the chamber's main hatch opened with a hiss. Valkaron swept in, chuckling to himself, his crimson robes trailing behind him. He held a bundle of scrolls, some imperial, others clearly Xenos in origin, inked in esoteric glyphs and warp script. Funny thing, he said without preamble. I found a ritual, well, more of a celestial mechanism tied to etheric currents that might just solve your little station problem. He unrolled one of the scrolls, letting it snap flat on the table. You see, the warp isn't all chaos and madness. There are lines, ley lines, ancient passages binding real space and immaterium together. And as it so happens, he grinned, tapping the parchment, the hollow crown sits almost exactly on one. He paused, letting the moment stretch. Then dropped another scroll. Now here's the catch. There are only 2 viable exit vectors we can use. One, he said with distaste, is Oceanus Orbi M35281b, your precious NihtWyrtha, which I'm told is a no. The other? He laid out the final scroll, marked with zodiacal constellations, sacred sigils, and fragments of prophecy scorched into its edges. Is a snowball world I've been to. Tiny, half-dead, completely worthless. Catalog ID KX Red 218. He smiled. And you'll never guess what it's called. Caden didn't blink. Carvansari, Valkaron blinked. How in the warp did you know? Caden looked down at the swirling constellations drawn across Valkaron's parchments. The warp paths, the fate threads, the cursed symmetry of it all. He exhaled slowly. We'll need aid, he said at last. The Hollow Crown is massive. This kind of movement isn't just ritual. It's fuel, souls, power. Valkaron's eyes gleamed from behind his helm. That much is obvious, he replied. I'll need a tithe, roughly 2,000 souls, willing, unwilling, it doesn't matter. The path requires payment. The warp never gives freely. Baelgor gave a dark chuckle. Elfscathia won't lack for volunteers or prisoners. Caden didn't smile. He turned toward Elith, who had remained silent through the exchange, her gaze fixed on the stars beyond the bone-latticed windows. She spoke without turning. You're not alone in this. Void Reaver is already in motion. His forces are working out a campaign of raiding the outer watchtowers of Navis Astra Wigathene. Minor victories, but effective. Enough to delay them. Enough to create space. She finally turned, robes flowing like shadowed oil. You'll have your window, but not twice. When the Hollow Crown moves, it must not be seen. If they detect you, if they learn it lives, they will pursue, and they will never stop. Caden nodded. Then we vanish, he said. And when they look for us, he looked to the artifact, to Sorny, to the echoing silence of forgotten empires. They'll find only myths.